As I reflect on my journey to the treacherous mountains of the North Pole, I am reminded of the delicate dance between ambition and caution that every adventurer must navigate. The allure of exploration beckons us, promising breathtaking vistas and the thrill of the unknown. Yet, beneath that enticing exterior lies a world fraught with peril, a landscape that has claimed the lives and dreams of many would-be explorers. My name is Henri, and I am from France, a traveler, a seeker of experiences, and ultimately, a witness to the consequences of underestimating nature's might. The North Pole has long been shrouded in mystery and intrigue. It has captivated the imaginations of explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. The vast, icy expanse offers a unique combination of beauty and danger, with towering glaciers, deep crevasses, and unpredictable weather. My fascination with this remote region began during my childhood, when I would pore over tales of legendary explorers like Ernest Shackleton and Robert Peary. Their stories of grit, determination, and unfathomable challenges ignited a spark within me, a desire to carve my path into the annals of exploration. As I prepared for my expedition to the North Pole, I meticulously researched every aspect of the journey. I trained rigorously, honing my skills in navigation, survival, and mountaineering. I gathered the best gear, ensuring that I was equipped to face the harsh Arctic conditions. However, as I packed my bags, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was overlooking something crucial. My excitement often drowned out the whispers of caution that urged me to acknowledge the risks that lay ahead. Upon arriving in the north, I was greeted by a landscape that felt both familiar and alien. The air was crisp, biting at my skin, while the horizon stretched endlessly, adorned with shimmering ice and snow. The sheer scale of the mountains before me was awe-inspiring, their peaks piercing the sky like jagged teeth. Yet, I was struck not just by their beauty, but by the palpable sense of foreboding that hung in the air, a reminder that I was a visitor in a realm that had its own rules. The local guides I encountered warned me of the dangers that lurked within the mountains. They spoke in hushed tones of treacherous paths, unpredictable weather, and the spirits said to inhabit the land. I listened, nodding along, but my adventurous spirit often brushed aside their words. I considered myself prepared and capable, believing that I could conquer whatever challenges lay ahead. I was driven by a desire to push my limits, to etch my name alongside the great explorers of the past. As I ventured deeper into the wilderness, the atmosphere shifted. The serene beauty morphed into an unsettling silence, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath my boots. The mountains seemed to loom closer, their presence growing more imposing with each passing moment. I began to notice the subtle signs of danger, a crack in the ice here, a sudden gust of wind there. Yet, my ambition propelled me forward, convincing me that I could handle whatever came my way. This unwavering determination reached its zenith when I embarked on my ascent of the most feared peak in the region. I had meticulously plotted my route, relying on maps and advice from fellow explorers, yet I felt a sense of unease that I could not shake. The mountain's reputation was built on tales of lost climbers and inexplicable accidents. Yet the thrill of standing atop its summit, gazing out over the vast Arctic expanse, was too intoxicating to resist. As I began my climb, the challenges became more pronounced. The terrain shifted from manageable slopes to sheer cliffs, each step demanding more of my strength and focus. The weather, once mild, turned harsh and unforgiving, snow swirling around me like a vortex. I pressed on, fueled by adrenaline and the desire to conquer what others deemed insurmountable. In that moment, I believed I could outwit the very forces of nature that had thwarted so many before me. But it was in those moments of ambition that I began to lose sight of my own limitations. The mountain, once a symbol of adventure, transformed into a formidable adversary, revealing its true nature, a harsh and unyielding environment that demanded respect. I felt the first inklings of fear settling in, a creeping realization that I had underestimated the power of this frozen titan. As I neared the summit, the howling winds grew fiercer, and I found myself grappling with both the elements and my own thoughts. Doubts crept into my mind, whispering that I had ventured too far, that I was unprepared for the challenges that awaited me. The thrill of exploration began to morph into a sense of dread, but my pride compelled me to continue. In retrospect, it was not merely the physical challenges that would test me, but the mental and emotional toll of confronting the vastness of the North Pole. I had set out seeking adventure, but what I found was a sobering lesson in humility. The mountains, with their breathtaking grandeur, were not just a terrain to be conquered. They were living entities that demanded reverence. a truth I was only beginning to understand. As I prepared for the next leg of my journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that the North Pole was a realm of duality, magnificence intertwined with danger, beauty masked by peril. I had embarked on this expedition with dreams of glory, unaware that the true challenge lay not in the mountains themselves, but in the lessons they would impart about respect, caution, and the delicate balance of nature. Little did I know that my miscalculations would soon lead me down a path I could never have anticipated, one that would confront me with the darkest depths of my own ambitions. As I continued my ascent into the icy heart of the North Pole, I realized that the mountains were not merely a backdrop to my adventure. They were a living, breathing entity that demanded my respect. Each crevice and peak seemed to whisper stories of past explorers, echoing the triumphs and tragedies of those who had come before me. It was in this realization that I began to understand the depth of the world I had entered, not just the physical landscape, but the emotional and spiritual terrain as well. Among the group of fellow adventurers I had met upon my arrival was a seasoned mountaineer named Jean-Pierre. He embodied the very spirit of exploration I admired, his weathered face etched with lines that told tales of hardship and perseverance. Jean-Pierre had spent decades traversing the most treacherous terrains, earning the respect of his peers and a reputation as a wise mentor. He often shared anecdotes of his experiences, and I found myself hanging on to his every word, eager to learn from someone who had battled the elements and emerged stronger. "Henri," he would say, his voice gravelly and warm, "the mountains teach us humility. They show us that we are but a small part of a greater world. Respect them, and they will respect you in return." His words resonated with me, yet I struggled to internalize the lesson. My youthful ambition often overshadowed the wisdom he imparted, and I found myself caught in a cycle of bravado. Then there was Elise, a biologist who had come to the North Pole to study climate change and its effects on the fragile ecosystem. She was fiercely passionate about her work, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm whenever she spoke of the intricate relationships between the flora and fauna of the Arctic. Elise's curiosity reminded me of the deeper purpose behind exploration, not just the thrill of adventure, but a commitment to understanding and preserving our planet. As we huddled around the campfire one night, Elise shared her findings about the delicate balance of life in the Arctic. "Every organism here plays a role, no matter how small," she explained, her voice animated. "The melting ice, the changing weather patterns, they all affect one another. We must learn to listen to these changes, to adapt our actions accordingly." Her words struck a chord within me, and I began to realize that my personal quest for glory was intertwined with a larger narrative, a story of coexistence with nature. I felt a growing responsibility to honor the land and its inhabitants, to acknowledge that my journey was not solely about conquering peaks, but about understanding the impact of my presence in this pristine environment. As the days passed, the landscape shifted and morphed, revealing the harsh realities of the Arctic. The once stunning vistas I had admired turned into a maze of treacherous ice formations and sudden crevasses. The weather became increasingly unpredictable. Blizzards erupted without warning, and the temperatures plunged to bone-chilling lows. Each challenge demanded resilience and adaptability, qualities I had often taken for granted. One fateful afternoon, as I struggled against the relentless wind, I caught sight of Jean-Pierre in the distance. He was carefully navigating a particularly treacherous section of ice, his movements deliberate and measured. I watched in awe as he demonstrated the wisdom gained from years of experience, placing each footstep with purpose and intention. It was a powerful reminder that exploration was not merely about speed or ambition. It was about patience, skill, and respect for the environment. By observing Jean-Pierre and Elise, I began to understand the importance of collaboration and community in the face of adversity. We were not isolated explorers. We were a team, each person contributing unique strengths to our shared goal. The camaraderie that developed among us became a lifeline, a source of motivation and support as we faced the mounting challenges of the North. Yet, the deeper I delved into this world, the more I grappled with my own identity as an adventurer. I wrestled with the duality of ambition and humility, the desire to prove myself against the backdrop of nature's grandeur while recognizing my own limitations. The mountains mirrored my inner struggle, their peaks representing the heights I aspired to reach, while their depths served as a reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface. One evening, as we gathered around the flickering firelight, I shared my thoughts with the group. "I came here seeking adventure, but I feel as though it's becoming something more. I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to understand the land, to connect with it, not just to conquer it. Jean-Pierre nodded, his expression thoughtful. That is the true essence of exploration, Henri. It's about forging a bond with the places we visit, about learning from them. The mountains have their own stories, and if we're willing to listen, they can teach us invaluable lessons. Elise chimed in, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Every moment spent here is an opportunity for growth. We are all part of this ecosystem, and it's our responsibility to protect it. By deepening our understanding, we can make a difference, even if it's just a small one. Their words resonated within me, igniting a spark of purpose that had been obscured by my initial ambitions. I began to see the North Pole not just as a destination, but as a teacher, a guide that would lead me on a path of self-discovery and insight. The mountains, once merely obstacles to overcome, transformed into companions on my journey, each summit a reflection of my own aspirations and fears. As we continued our ascent, I resolved to embrace this new perspective. I would approach the challenges ahead with reverence and humility, seeking not only to conquer the peaks, but to learn from the land and the people who inhabited it. The North Pole was no longer just a place. It was a world of wonder and wisdom, waiting to reveal its secrets to those willing to listen. In that moment of clarity, I understood that the true adventure lay not in reaching the summit, but in the journey itself, a journey enriched by the connections I forged and the lessons I learned along the way. The transformation of my journey into a deeper exploration of the North Pole came to a head when we faced an unforeseen conflict that would test our resolve and commitment to each other. As we continued our ascent into the mountains, the weather grew increasingly volatile. The wind howled like a wild beast, whipping around us with a ferocity that made it difficult to maintain our footing. Each step became a battle against nature's wrath, and the camaraderie we had built began to fray under the pressure. One particular morning, the sky darkened ominously, and a heavy snowfall began to fall, obscuring our visibility. It was then that we received a radio call from the base camp, warning us of an approaching storm that would hit sooner than anticipated. Panic rippled through our group as we processed the information. "We need to turn back," Jean-Pierre suggested, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. "We can't risk being caught in a blizzard." I felt a surge of resistance rising within me. I had come this far, and the thought of retreating seemed unacceptable. "But we're so close to the peak," I argued. "We can make it if we push just a little further." Elise, sensing the tension mounting, intervened. "Henri, we need to prioritize our safety. The mountains will always be there, but our lives are at stake." Her voice was calm, yet it carried an urgency that resonated with the gravity of the situation. As the storm intensified, the group fell into a heated debate. Some members echoed my sentiment, eager to forge ahead and seize the moment, while others echoed Jean-Pierre's caution. The once unified front we had built began to splinter, and I could feel the weight of my ambition pressing down on me like the heavy snow. The turning point came when we decided to split the group. Jean-Pierre, Elise, and a few others opted to descend back to base camp, while I, along with two other eager adventurers, Mark and Lila, insisted on continuing our ascent. "We can't let fear dictate our journey," I argued, driven by a mix of adrenaline and stubbornness. "We've trained for this, and we owe it to ourselves to see it through." As we pushed forward into the storm, the winds howled with a menacing intensity. The biting cold penetrated through our gear, and the snow fell in thick sheets, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet in front of us. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. The mountains, which had once seemed inviting, now felt like a labyrinth of ice and shadow. After hours of battling the elements, we finally reached a narrow ledge that overlooked a breathtaking valley below. The view was stunning, but the joy of the moment was short-lived. As I turned to share my excitement with Mark and Lila, I noticed a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The wind picked up sharply, and the clouds rolled in, dark and heavy. Without warning, a rumble echoed through the mountains, and I felt the ground beneath us tremble. "An avalanche!" Mark shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. Panic surged through me as I realized we were perilously close to the edge of the slope. In an instant, I saw the snow begin to cascade down the mountainside, an unstoppable force of nature that threatened to engulf us. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We scrambled backward, adrenaline fueling our movements as we desperately sought safety. The world around us erupted into chaos as snow and ice tumbled down the mountain, swallowing everything in their path. I could hear the deafening roar of the avalanche, a sound that would haunt me forever. In the midst of the chaos, I lost sight of Lila. My heart raced with fear as I turned back, calling her name, but the howling wind drowned out my voice. In that moment, I was faced with the horrifying realization that my ambition had put us in a position of life and death. The chaos of the avalanche unfolded like a nightmare, and in that moment, the complexities of our expedition became painfully clear. As the snow surged down the mountainside, the raw power of nature laid bare not just our vulnerability, but also the intricate web of relationships and emotions that had developed among us. Each of us was wrestling with our own fears and motivations, and the avalanche was merely a catalyst that brought these underlying tensions to the forefront. As I scrambled to find Lila, I could hear Mark's frantic calls as he searched for her too. Our initial eagerness to conquer the mountain was overshadowed by the stark reality that our lives were now at stake. The bond we had formed began to fray under the weight of our predicament. I could see the fear in Mark's eyes, a flicker of doubt that mirrored my own. "We have to stick together," he shouted, his voice a mix of urgency and desperation. But with the snow still cascading down around us, the very foundation of that unity felt threatened. In the midst of the chaos, I couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at me. I had insisted on continuing the ascent, dismissing the warnings from Jean-Pierre and Elise. My ambition had led us into this perilous situation, and now, as I fought against the snow and wind, I questioned whether my desire for glory was worth the risk to my friends. Meanwhile, Lila's absence felt like an anchor dragging me down. I had noticed her hesitation earlier. She had admired the mountain's beauty, but seemed torn between her desire to explore and her instinct to retreat. As the avalanche rumbled on, I realized that her struggle mirrored my own, a conflict between ambition and safety that we each needed to navigate. The weight of our choices pressed heavily on my shoulders. Mark and I managed to find a small outcropping that provided temporary shelter from the onslaught of snow. As we crouched there, breaths visible in the frigid air, I could see the uncertainty etched on his face. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We wait for the storm to pass," I replied, though my mind raced with questions. Would Lila find her way back to us? Had we made the right decision to split from the others? My internal turmoil was disrupted by a sudden realization. I had become just as much a prisoner of my ambition as I had been a seeker of adventure. As we waited, the storm began to subside, revealing a hushed landscape blanketed in white. It was beautiful yet haunting, the destruction left behind a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Just then I spotted movement in the distance, a figure struggling through the snow. My heart leaped. "Lila!" I shouted, hope igniting within me. But as the figure drew closer, my heart sank. It was not Lila, but Elise, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. "I saw the avalanche," she gasped, her breath coming in quick bursts. "Where's Lila?" I swallowed hard, the weight of my earlier decisions bearing down on me like a heavy stone. We lost her in the chaos," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I thought we could make it to the peak." Elise's expression shifted from fear to anger, her voice rising above the howling wind. "Your ambition almost cost us everything. You didn't listen to the warnings, and now we're in this mess." Her words cut deep, and I felt the sting of her disappointment. "I know," I replied, shame flooding through me. "I thought I could lead us, that we could achieve something remarkable together. But I was wrong. I underestimated the mountains and the risks involved." The tension in the air thickened as Elise turned away, her frustration palpable. In that moment, I understood that our conflict was not just about the physical dangers of the mountains, but also the emotional battles we faced within ourselves. Each of us had different motivations for being there. Some sought personal glory, while others were driven by a sense of responsibility to protect the group. As the storm finally began to relent, we gathered our strength and set out to search for Lila. The world around us was transformed, the once familiar landscape now a vast, desolate expanse. Each step felt heavy as we called her name, our voices echoing in the silence. The search was daunting, and with every passing moment, my heart sank deeper into despair. What had begun as a journey of exploration had morphed into a desperate quest for survival. The mountains, which had once promised adventure, now felt like a labyrinth of uncertainty, where every decision could lead to salvation or ruin. The conflicts that had arisen within our group now loomed larger than ever, complicating our search for Lila and testing the bonds we had forged. As we navigated the treacherous terrain, I realized that the true battle was not just against the elements, but against the doubts and fears that threatened our unity. Each of us would have to confront our own motivations and desires if we were ever to find Lila and make it back safely. The mountains had stripped away the facade of bravado, leaving us vulnerable yet stronger in our shared humanity. Little did I know, the resolution of our conflict lay ahead, in the heart of the icy wilderness, waiting to reveal its lessons. The turning point of our harrowing journey arrived unexpectedly, a moment that would redefine our understanding of resilience, trust, and the true nature of exploration. After what felt like an eternity of searching for Lila, a glimmer of hope emerged when we stumbled upon a small, makeshift cave hidden among the rocks, partially obscured by the thick layer of snow. The entrance was narrow, but it offered a reprieve from the relentless wind and a chance to regroup. Elise and I exchanged glances, sensing that we had a rare opportunity to take a breath and devise a plan. As we huddled inside the cave, the howling winds outside transformed into a distant murmur, creating a cocoon of sound that felt both protective and disorienting. The warmth of our bodies created a stark contrast to the biting cold of the Arctic wilderness, and for a moment, the weight of our predicament felt lighter. "Do you think Lila could have made it here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The flickering light of our headlamps illuminated the rough stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts around us. Elise shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's possible, but we can't assume anything. We need to be strategic. We have to conserve energy and find a way to signal for help." Her calm demeanor grounded me, and I felt a flicker of hope rekindle within. We sat in silence for a moment, the reality of our situation settling heavily upon us. I thought of Lila, her laughter, and the spark of adventure that had drawn us all together. She was out there somewhere, and the thought of losing her fueled my determination to press on. "Let's take turns keeping watch," I suggested, trying to inject a sense of purpose into the moment. "We need to be ready to move as soon as the storm clears. If we stay here too long, we risk being trapped." Elise nodded in agreement, and we established a rotation. I took the first watch, sitting at the cave entrance and peering into the swirling snow. The white chaos outside was disorienting, a reminder of the vastness of the wilderness that surrounded us. As I sat there, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. This was not just about me anymore. My actions would affect everyone's fate, especially Lila's. Hours passed, and as the storm began to wane, a flicker of movement in the distance caught my eye. My heart raced as I strained to see through the blizzard. Was it a figment of my imagination, or could that be a figure? I rubbed my eyes and leaned forward, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Elise," I called, my voice breaking the stillness of the cave. "I think I see something." She joined me at the entrance, and together, we squinted into the swirling snow. As the gusts began to die down, the figure became clearer. Someone was trudging through the snow, their movements slow and labored. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of hope and dread. "It's Lila," I shouted, disbelief transforming into exhilaration. Without waiting for a second thought, I bolted out of the cave, ignoring the biting cold that stung my skin. "Lila," I called out, my voice echoing against the mountain walls. As I approached, I could see the weariness etched on her face, her clothes tattered, and her movements sluggish. But her eyes lit up at the sight of me, and she managed a weak smile. "Henri, I thought I'd never find you," she gasped, her breath visible in the frigid air. Relief flooded over me as I embraced her, squeezing her tightly, as if to banish the fear that had gripped my heart. "We were so worried. Where have you been?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "I got separated during the avalanche. I tried to find shelter and came across some rocks. I thought I could wait it out," she explained, her voice trembling. But the storm was relentless. I was so scared. Elise emerged from the cave, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "Lila, you're safe. That's all that matters," she said, wrapping her arms around Lila. But as the three of us stood together, the weight of the situation began to settle back in. The storm had cleared, but we were still deep in the wilderness, and we needed to find our way back to safety. "Can you walk?" I asked Lila, assessing her condition. She nodded, though her face reflected exhaustion. "I think so. I just need to catch my breath." We decided to head back to the cave for a brief respite. Inside, we gathered around the small remaining supplies we had, some food and water, which we rationed carefully. It was during this moment of quiet that I realized the true turning point was not just Lila's return, but the realization of how our dynamics had shifted. The earlier conflicts and tensions among us had transformed into a deepened bond forged by shared adversity. We had faced the chaos of nature, but more importantly, we had confronted our individual motivations and fears. The ambition that had once driven me now felt secondary to the importance of teamwork and survival. From now on, we stick together, I declared, looking each of them in the eye. No more splitting up or taking unnecessary risks. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Lila nodded, her expression serious. Agreed. We're stronger together. Mark, who had been silent until now, chimed in. We've made it this far. Let's not let the mountains break us. We can find our way back. With a renewed sense of purpose, we formulated a plan. We would navigate back to base camp together, leveraging each of our strengths to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. The mountains, once a symbol of danger, now felt like a shared challenge that we would face as a united front. As we prepared to leave the cave, I took one last glance at the landscape around us. The snow glistened under the pale sun, and the mountains stood tall and imposing. I understood now that they were not just obstacles to conquer, but companions in our journey. A reminder of the lessons we had learned about humility, trust, and the undeniable strength of human connection. Together, we stepped out into the cold, ready to face whatever awaited us, determined to return not just as explorers, but as friends who had weathered the storm together. The true adventure lay ahead, and with it, the promise of growth, understanding, and the unyielding spirit of exploration. As we emerged from the cave, the harsh light of the Arctic sun greeted us like a beacon of hope. The storm had dissipated, leaving behind a serene landscape that belied the chaos we had just endured. However, the aftermath of our harrowing experience weighed heavily on all of us. The journey back to base camp would not only test our physical endurance, but also force us to confront the emotional consequences of our choices. Lila, despite her exhaustion, took the lead as we navigated the snow-covered terrain. Her determination inspired us all, but I could sense that beneath her brave facade lay a well of fear and anxiety. As we trudged onward, I made it a point to check in with her. "Are you doing okay?" I asked quietly, falling back to walk beside her. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the weariness of our ordeal. "I'm fine," she replied, though there was a tremor in her voice. I can't shake the feeling that I almost didn't make it back." Her vulnerability struck a chord within me. We had all brushed against the precipice of disaster, and I realized that our survival was not merely a matter of physical strength, but also of emotional resilience. "We're all feeling that way," I reassured her. "But we made it, Lila. We fought through the storm together. You showed incredible strength." As we continued our trek, the conversation shifted to our reflections on the journey. Mark, who had been quieter since Lila's return, finally spoke up. I thought I was prepared for this. I trained hard, read all the right books, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality out here." His voice was laced with frustration. Elise chimed in. "None of us could have anticipated the avalanche or the intensity of the storm. It's easy to think we're ready, but nature has its own rules." Her pragmatic approach seemed to help ease the tension, but I could see the shadows of doubt lingering in Mark's eyes. We pressed on, each step a reminder of our shared experience. The mountains loomed like silent sentinels, a constant reminder of the dangers we had faced. I felt a mix of gratitude and trepidation, grateful that we had made it this far, yet fearful of what lay ahead. As we reached a ridge overlooking the path back to base camp, the landscape unfolded before us, a breathtaking panorama of white, glistening under the bright sun. Yet, as beautiful as it was, the sight triggered a wave of anxiety in me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in danger, that the mountains could turn on us at any moment. "Look over there," Lila pointed, her voice breaking the silence. "That's the way we came from." I followed her gaze, and for the first time, I felt a sense of direction, a goal to strive for. But as we descended the ridge, I was acutely aware of the consequences of our earlier decisions. The emotional scars from the storm lingered, and I sensed a shift in our group dynamic. When we reached a more stable area, we paused to catch our breath. The moment felt significant. The adrenaline had subsided, and the reality of our experience settled in. "We need to talk about what happened," I suggested, my voice steady. "We can't just brush it aside." Jean-Pierre, who had been listening silently, nodded in agreement. "It's important to reflect on our choices and their consequences. We were lucky, but not everyone is. We need to learn from this." I could see Mark's shoulders tense at the mention of luck. "But what if we hadn't been lucky?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. What if Lila hadn't made it back? I can't help but think about the risks we took. Lila placed a hand on his arm, her expression softening. We all made choices, Mark. It's part of being out here. We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. I know I will. The conversation shifted into a deeper reflection on our motivations for pursuing such dangerous adventures. Elise spoke about her commitment to studying the effects of climate change on the Arctic environment, while Lila shared her desire to inspire others to appreciate the beauty of nature. Mark admitted that he had initially sought to prove himself, to validate his skills as an explorer. Maybe that's why I felt so lost out here, he admitted. I was focused on my own ambition instead of the team. I've realized that exploration isn't just about conquering mountains. It's about understanding the journey we're on together. His revelation resonated with me. I had been so consumed by my ambition that I had failed to recognize the importance of connection and collaboration. The mountains had taught us all profound lessons, and the conversations we shared became a catalyst for growth. As we resumed our trek, the atmosphere among us began to shift. We moved with newfound purpose, no longer just individual adventurers but a cohesive team. We supported each other through the challenging terrain, taking turns navigating and ensuring we remained together. The bonds we formed in the wake of adversity began to solidify into something more profound. By the time we finally spotted the base camp in the distance, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the snow. A sense of relief washed over me, but it was accompanied by a deeper sense of gratitude. We had not only survived the physical challenges of the North Pole, but had also faced our internal struggles and emerged stronger for it. As we approached the camp, a mixture of emotions filled the air: relief, gratitude, and a newfound appreciation for the beauty and brutality of nature. I looked at each of my companions, recognizing that we had all changed in some way. The consequences of our journey extended beyond mere survival. We had forged connections that would last a lifetime. That night, as we gathered around a warmth-providing fire, the atmosphere was different than it had been when we first set out. There was a sense of camaraderie that went beyond mere acquaintance. We were bound together by shared experiences and lessons learned. We exchanged stories, laughter, and reflections on our journey, each of us contributing to the narrative of our adventure. The consequences of our choices had brought us together, and while the mountains remained formidable, they no longer felt insurmountable. We had faced our fears, confronted our ambitions, and learned the value of teamwork and trust in the face of adversity. As I gazed into the flickering flames, I felt hopeful for the future. We would carry these lessons with us, not just as explorers of mountains, but as stewards of the earth, committed to understanding and respecting the delicate balance between humanity and nature. I knew our journey was just beginning, and the lessons learned in the North Pole would guide us in all our future adventures. As the warmth of the fire enveloped us, I could feel the weight of our shared experiences gradually lifting. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of resilience and renewal. We had not just survived the North Pole, we had emerged transformed, shaped by the trials we had faced together. The journey ahead would not only be a physical one, but also an emotional and spiritual odyssey toward overcoming our fears and embracing growth. In the days that followed our return to base camp, we shifted our focus from survival to reflection. Each of us took the time to process the events of our harrowing adventure. For me, it was essential to confront my own motivations and the reckless ambition that had driven me to push forward despite the warnings of my companions. It was a humbling realization that I had to face. I sought out Elise, who had proven to be a grounding presence throughout our ordeal. Elise, I began hesitantly. I've been thinking a lot about what we experienced. I realize now that my desire to conquer the mountain blinded me to the risks we faced. She nodded thoughtfully, her eyes filled with understanding. It's natural to feel that way, Henri. We all have our reasons for exploring, but it's crucial to recognize when ambition becomes reckless. The mountains are a powerful teacher, but we must be willing students. Her words resonated deeply with me. I understood that growth often comes from acknowledging our failures and learning to navigate the fine line between ambition and responsibility. It was a lesson I was determined to carry forward. Meanwhile, Mark had taken it upon himself to organize daily discussions among our group. He understood that the emotional scars we bore were as significant as the physical challenges we had faced. "We need to check in with each other," he said one evening as we gathered around the fire. "Let's share what we've learned from this experience." As we took turns speaking, I was struck by the vulnerability of my companions. Lila spoke first, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. I've realized that I can't let fear dictate my choices. I was so afraid of failing that I almost let it paralyze me. But now, I see that it's okay to embrace uncertainty. Mark followed, his tone more reflective. For me, this journey has highlighted the importance of teamwork. I came here to prove something about myself, but I learned that true strength lies in our ability to collaborate and support one another. I won't forget that. Elise shared her insights as well, emphasizing the need to respect nature's power. We cannot control the mountains or the storms, but we can control how we respond to them. This experience has taught me to approach my work with humility and respect. When I finally spoke, I felt a mix of vulnerability and determination. I've learned that ambition can be a double-edged sword. It drives us to explore, to push boundaries, but it can also cloud our judgment. I want to be an explorer who respects both the mountains and the people I journey with. The dialogue we shared that night felt cathartic, as if we were shedding the burdens of guilt and fear that had clung to us since the avalanche. With each story, we forged deeper connections, realizing that we were not just a group of adventurers, but a community bound by shared experiences and lessons learned. As we prepared for the next leg of our journey, I felt a shift within myself. The mountains no longer represented mere obstacles to conquer, but rather reflections of the challenges we faced in life. Each peak symbolized a lesson, and every valley represented the importance of resilience. I was no longer the reckless adventurer eager for glory. I was becoming a more mindful explorer, committed to both personal growth and the well-being of my companions. In the following days, we ventured into the surrounding wilderness with a renewed perspective. Rather than racing to the next peak, we took the time to appreciate the beauty of the landscape, from the delicate patterns etched into the ice to the shimmering auroras that danced across the night sky. We learned to listen to the mountains, to understand their stories, and to respect their power. One evening, as we gathered to watch the northern lights, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The colors swirled above us, greens, purples, and blues, creating a mesmerizing tapestry that seemed to echo the journey we had undertaken. I realized that growth was not a destination, but a continuous process of learning and adapting. In the weeks that followed, our bonds deepened further. We became each other's support systems, celebrating not only our individual triumphs, but also our collective growth. We shared meals, stories, and laughter, creating memories that would last long after we left the North Pole behind. One day, while traversing a particularly tricky section of ice, I found myself slipping. Panic surged through me, but before I could fall, Mark reached out and steadied me. "I've got you," he shouted, his voice filled with assurance. In that moment, I understood the strength of our connections. We were no longer isolated adventurers, but a cohesive team, ready to lift one another when the going got tough. Our journey culminated in a final ascent to a viewpoint that overlooked the expanse of the North Pole. As we stood atop that peak, the world stretched out before us, a breathtaking vista of ice and sky. A sense of accomplishment washed over me, not just for reaching the summit, but for the growth we had experienced together. Looking around at my companions, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. We had faced the elements and our own fears, emerging not only as better explorers, but as better people. I realized that overcoming challenges required a willingness to learn, adapt, and support one another. As we descended from that peak, I felt a sense of closure, but also a renewed commitment to continue exploring. Not just the world around me, but also the depths of my own character. The mountains would always call to me, but now I understood that true exploration was about more than conquering heights. It was about embracing the journey, the connections we made, and the lessons we learned along the way. As we prepared to leave the North Pole, I knew that the experience would remain etched in my heart, a reminder of the power of growth, resilience, and the bonds we forged in the face of adversity. I left with not only stories of adventure, but also a deeper understanding of what it meant to be an explorer, one who respects both the mountains and the people who journey alongside them. The North Pole had changed me, and I was ready to carry those lessons into every new adventure that awaited. As we settled into a new rhythm in the days leading up to the climax of our journey, a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. The North Pole, with its vast icy expanse and towering glaciers, was no longer just a beautiful yet treacherous landscape. It had become a character in our story, one that challenged us and molded our identities. With our newfound perspective and strengthened bonds, we were preparing for one final ascent, a challenge that would test everything we had learned and experienced together. Our objective was clear: to reach the summit of a formidable peak known as Mount Elysium. It was a towering formation that loomed over our camp, a silent sentinel that had watched us grow and evolve through our trials. The peak was both a physical and symbolic destination, representing not just the culmination of our expedition, but the personal growth we had achieved as individuals and as a team. In the days leading up to our final ascent, we focused on meticulous preparations. We gathered supplies, checked our gear, and discussed our strategy. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, we would sit together and review the plan. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and nervous energy, and I could sense that everyone was keenly aware of the significance of this climb. Elise took the lead in outlining our route. We'll begin early in the morning to take advantage of the cooler temperatures, which will help the snow remain compact, she explained, her focus evident as she traced the proposed path on a map spread out before us. We'll need to be careful of potential crevasses, especially on the eastern face. Trust your instincts, and if anything feels off, we'll reassess. Mark nodded, his usual enthusiasm bubbling to the surface. We've faced worse together. Remember the avalanche? If we can get through that, we can tackle anything. His optimism was infectious, and I found myself smiling at the way he rallied the group. Let's not forget our teamwork, Lila added, her voice steady and assuring. We need to communicate constantly and look out for each other. No one gets left behind this time. Her words echoed the lessons we had learned from our previous challenges, reinforcing the importance of collaboration in the face of adversity. As the night wore on, we made our final checks on our equipment and gear. I meticulously inspected my climbing harness, ropes, and ice axes, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. Each item felt like a weight on my shoulders, not just in the physical sense, but also as a reminder of the responsibility I carried toward my companions. The memories of our past struggles fueled my determination to make this a safe and successful ascent. That night, sleep eluded me as I lay in my sleeping bag, staring up at the fabric of the tent. The shadows of our experiences danced in my mind, and I grappled with my lingering fears and doubts. What if something went wrong? What if I failed to lead my friends safely to the summit? The weight of these questions pressed down on me, but as I closed my eyes, I reminded myself of the growth and strength we had forged together. We were not just individuals anymore. We were a team, bound by our shared experiences. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the sun rising over the horizon like an artist unveiling a masterpiece. The landscape sparkled with fresh snow, and the air was filled with the invigorating scent of ice and cold. As we gathered for breakfast, I could feel the excitement coursing through the group. The moment we had been preparing for had finally arrived. "Today is the day," Mark exclaimed, his enthusiasm palpable. "We're going to conquer Mount Elysium and make memories that will last a lifetime." His words ignited a fire within us, and we began to rally around the shared vision of what lay ahead. After a quick breakfast, we donned our gear, double-checked our supplies, and gathered at the base of Mount Elysium. The sheer magnitude of the peak loomed before us, a towering challenge that seemed to both intimidate and inspire. I took a moment to look around at my companions, their faces filled with determination. We exchanged nods of encouragement, silently promising to support one another through whatever lay ahead. As we began our ascent, the atmosphere shifted from anticipation to focus. We moved in unison, every step deliberate and measured. The crisp air filled my lungs, and with each breath, I felt my confidence building. I led the way, keeping a steady pace while ensuring that everyone was comfortable. The initial stretch of the climb presented a series of steep inclines and rocky outcrops. The challenges felt familiar, and as we tackled each section, I could see the growth in my companions. Mark took the lead on some of the more technical sections, guiding Lila with reassuring words as she followed closely behind. Elise, ever the observant one, pointed out potential hazards, reminding us to stay vigilant. As we ascended higher, the air grew thinner and the temperature dropped. The wind whipped around us, a reminder of the mountain's unpredictable nature. It was during one of these moments that I felt a wave of doubt wash over me again. The climb was becoming increasingly difficult, and the reality of our fight against nature began to weigh heavily on my shoulders. "Henri, are you okay?" Lila's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see concern etched on her face. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just feeling the weight of it all," I admitted, trying to mask my uncertainty. "Remember what we talked about? We're in this together, she encouraged, her eyes steady and supportive. Her words were a balm to my anxiety, reminding me of the strength we had cultivated as a team. As we pressed on, we encountered a particularly challenging section of the climb, a steep, icy slope that demanded our utmost concentration and skill. The atmosphere became tense as we navigated the treacherous terrain. Each step required careful placement of our crampons, and I felt the pressure mounting as I led the way. "Stay close," I urged, my voice steady despite the churn of anxiety in my stomach. The stakes felt high, and I was acutely aware of the responsibility I carried for my friend's safety. As we reached the top of the icy slope, a collective sigh of relief echoed through the group. I turned to celebrate our small victory, but before I could speak, a loud crack reverberated through the air. The sound sent chills down my spine, and my heart raced as I looked up to see a fissure forming in the ice above us. "Everyone, hold on!" I shouted, my instincts kicking in. The tension of the moment became electric as we braced ourselves for what was to come. In that instant, I realized that our journey was not just about reaching the summit. It was about facing the unknown together, prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. As I steadied myself, I took a deep breath and focused on my companions. "Stay together. We can do this," I called out, rallying our spirits as we prepared to navigate this new obstacle. The lessons, the growth, and the bonds we had forged would guide us through the climax of our adventure, and I was determined to lead us safely through to the other side. The moment the crack echoed through the air, time seemed to slow down. The fissure carved itself into the icy surface above us, and panic surged through my body as I instinctively shouted for everyone to hold on. The mountain, which had once felt like a majestic companion, now seemed to morph into an unpredictable adversary. Each of us instinctively tightened our grips on our gear, our eyes darting around for the safest course of action. "Stay low. Move away from the edge," I yelled, my voice barely heard over the howling wind. The ground trembled beneath our feet, sending a shiver of fear coursing through me. I could see the uncertainty in my companion's eyes. Mark's brow furrowed in concentration, Lila's face pale, and Elisa's gaze focused as she assessed the situation. As we scrambled away from the immediate danger, I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility wash over me. I had pushed us to this point, insisting we continue our ascent despite the warnings of the mountain. Now, I had to lead us through this crisis. "Everyone, let's regroup," I called out, trying to maintain a voice of authority amidst the fear. "We need to find a safer route. Let's stick together and communicate." I glanced at Elise, who began scanning the area, her mind already assessing our options. "Look over there," she pointed, her voice cutting through the chaos. "There's a ledge we can use to bypass this section. It should be stable enough." Relief flooded through me as I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. We moved toward the ledge, my heart racing as I led the way. My mind raced with thoughts. What if the mountain shifted again? What if we lost our footing? I could feel the weight of my companion's trust weighing heavily on my shoulders. Each step felt like a test of my resolve. As we reached the ledge, I turned to help Lila up, my hand steadying her as she climbed. "You've got this," I encouraged, trying to mask my own fear. Her determination shone through as she pulled herself up, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thanks, Henri," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of our situation. Her trust in me reignited my own resolve. We were all in this together, and I needed to remember that our strength lay in our unity. Once we were safely on the ledge, I took a moment to catch my breath. The view from here was breathtaking, but it also reminded me of how precarious our position was. The mountain loomed large above us, and I could see the icy expanse stretching out, a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. "Let's keep moving," Mark urged, his enthusiasm returning despite the earlier chaos. "We're so close to the summit." His words ignited a fire within me, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose as we pressed on. As we navigated the ledge, the terrain grew increasingly challenging. The snow was deep, and we had to take care with each step to avoid slipping. My heart raced with every footfall, but I felt the support of my companions beside me. We communicated constantly, checking in as we moved forward, and in those moments, I realized how far we had come, not just as climbers, but as friends. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of navigating the treacherous path, we reached a plateau that marked the final stretch to the summit. The view was awe-inspiring, a breathtaking panorama of icy peaks and vast expanses stretching endlessly before us. Yet, amidst the beauty, I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "This is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We're almost there. The excitement was palpable, but I could also sense the underlying tension. The mountain had shown us its fury. We needed to respect its power as we approached the final ascent. As we gathered ourselves for the last push, I took a moment to look at each of my companions. Their faces were resolute, reflecting the growth we had all undergone. I felt a surge of pride in what we had accomplished together. Back to see the snow shifting ominously. "Everyone, hold on!" I shouted, instinctively reaching for Lila and Mark to steady them as the ground beneath us began to give way. In that moment, everything became a blur. The world around me shifted as we scrambled to find our footing. I felt a surge of panic, but fought to keep my focus. "We need to move. Follow me," I yelled, my voice cutting through the chaos. As we surged forward, I felt the ground tremble beneath us, but we pressed on, driven by the urgency of the moment. The finish line was so close, we could not turn back now. The summit was within our grasp, and I felt a fierce determination to protect my friends, to see us all through to the end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of scrambling and pushing against the icy surface, we reached the summit. I pulled myself up, collapsing onto the snow, gasping for breath. The view before us was breathtaking, a sweeping panorama of white-capped mountains and endless horizons. It felt surreal, as if I had crossed into another world. One by one, my companions joined me at the top, and as we gathered together, the reality of our achievement washed over us. We had faced the mountain's fury and emerged victorious. Tears of joy filled my eyes as I looked at each of them, the bonds we had forged in the crucible of our shared experiences shining brightly. "This is incredible," Lila breathed, her voice filled with awe. Mark raised his arms in triumph, a wide grin spread across his face. "We did it! We really did it!" Elise pulled out a small flag, a symbol of our journey. "Let's commemorate this moment," she said, her voice steady. As she planted the flag into the snow, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. We had not only conquered the mountain, we had conquered our fears, our doubts, and our past mistakes. In that moment, we stood together, a testament to our resilience and growth. As the wind whipped around us, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the beauty of the moment to sink in. We had faced the storm, the avalanche, and the treacherous climb, and together we had triumphed. The mountain had tested us, but it had also forged us into something stronger. In that frozen expanse, we found not just victory, but a profound understanding of what it means to truly explore, to embrace the challenges, to learn from our failures, and to celebrate our successes as a unified force. The summit of Mount Elysium was not just a destination. It was a reminder of the journey we had taken together and the bonds that would endure long after we descended. As we stood there, the world beneath us stretching infinitely, I knew that this was just the beginning. The true spirit of exploration lay not in conquering the mountains, but in the connections we forged and the lessons we learned along the way. And with that realization, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace whatever adventures awaited us in the future. As we descended from the summit of Mount Elysium, the reality of our journey settled in like a warm embrace. Each step down the mountain felt lighter than the ascent, not just because of the physical relief, but due to the emotional weight we had shed along the way. The trials we faced had transformed us, binding us together in ways we had never anticipated. The mountain, once a formidable adversary, had become a profound teacher, imparting lessons that would resonate long after we returned home. Reflecting on our experience, I realized that our journey was not solely about reaching a physical peak. It was about the growth we had undergone, learning to trust one another, to communicate effectively, and to navigate the complexities of both nature and our own emotions. We had entered the expedition as individuals, each with our own dreams and aspirations, but we emerged as a cohesive unit, enriched by our shared struggles and triumphs. The bonds we forged were evident in the laughter and stories we shared during our descent. Mark, ever the optimist, recounted our misadventures with humor, lightening the mood and reminding us of the importance of joy even in the face of adversity. Lila, who had once hesitated at the brink of the climb, now radiated confidence, her spirit buoyed by our collective achievement. Elise, the steady anchor of our group, reflected on the lessons learned, emphasizing the delicate balance between ambition and caution. As we reached base camp, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had not only conquered the mountain, we had confronted our fears and emerged stronger on the other side. The lessons of resilience and teamwork would remain etched in our memories, guiding us in future endeavors, both on the mountain and in life. In the days that followed, our reflections deepened. We shared our thoughts on what had changed within us, how our perspectives had shifted. The North Pole had challenged us, stripped us of our pretenses, and revealed the core of who we were. It was a humbling experience, one that reminded us of the fragility of life and the power of collaboration. As we prepared to go our separate ways, I understood that this journey was just one chapter in our lives. The mountains would always call to us, but it was the connections we had formed that would outlast any summit we might conquer. We had learned that exploration is not merely about conquering the heights, but about the relationships we cultivate, the stories we share, and the growth we experience along the way. With a final embrace and promises to stay in touch, we parted ways, each carrying a piece of our adventure with us. The North Pole had changed us, and as I looked back at the towering peaks against the horizon, I felt a sense of peace and excitement for the adventures that awaited. We were no longer just climbers, we were explorers of life, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that together we could overcome anything. Months later, as I sat in a cafe, I found myself tracing the contours of the North Pole on a map laid out before me. Each line and mark represented not just geography, but the experiences that had shaped me. The bonds formed in the icy wilderness remained strong, with regular messages exchanged among the group. Our adventure had sparked a new passion for exploration in my life, reminding me that every journey, big or small, holds the potential for growth and connection. Are you ready to embark on your own adventure? Step outside your comfort zone, seek new experiences, and embrace the lessons they bring. Whether it's a hike, a solo trip, or a project you've been putting off, take that first step today. Remember, the world is vast, and your journey awaits. Dare to explore it.